Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Board Gaming Doctor. My name is Phil, and I'll be your Board Game Doctor today. In this video, I'm going to talk about my first impressions of Nova Era with the help of the mod from CMON on Tabletop Simulator. So this game popped up on the Hotness on Board Game Geek not too long ago. I believe at the time of the recording, it's in the top 3, if not, it's the hottest game right now that's being talked about. And this game, which is designed by, I forgot the name of the designer. It's the designer of Marvel United. Here we go. Andrea Chiaravesio. So this game is a civilization-themed game that utilizes dice and cards to advance on a few tracks, play cards to your tableau, and score victory points. And whoever has the most victory points by the end of the game wins. So in this game, it's a 2 to 4 player game. I played this game semi-two-handed to experience it. And this is my board, and this is my opponent, who was me. And so I'll go through a quick overview of some of the mechanisms and what you're trying to do in this game. And we'll go from there and talk about game comparisons, peer review from those who have already played it and commented on it on Board Game Geek, and then finally go through my criteria for what a good game is to me and give it a final score. So in this game, you follow a few phases as outlined here in the round structure, where you pick dice, advance on tracks, and resolve some tracks that you're going on that have some negative effects. You take actions, 3 actions per round. You look for those other negative effects from tracks. You have a production phase, score, and clean up, and you do it all over again over the course of 9 rounds total, 3 rounds in each era. And so what happens is you have, first of all, this market of cards. Very much here's one quick comparison, very much like in Nations, and I believe Nations, the dice game as well. You have a market of cards, but you can only purchase them from the bottom row. And this is an ending situation of the game where these are some of the Era 3 cards that you have here, as noted here. So you always have 4 options to choose from, with future options being laid out in front of you along the way. You also have an option of personality cards. These are like the leaders in Through the Ages, another quick comparison, where you can purchase these for additional effects. And you play them onto your tableau, organized into 4 different categories that are separated by icons and colors. So a lot of these cards have abilities that you can utilize in the production phase. They give you ongoing income. They give you ongoing abilities that apply during certain phases of the game. Give you protections, etc. Some of them cost more, or they give you, reductions in cost for other cards, and they also can count towards a counting of how many cards you have in each column, because the crux of this game, besides the way that the dice action selection works, which I'll get to in a bit, the way that you score in this game is you count up up to 4 points per scoring round for each type of color card that you have, and you also will score more points if you have the most type of a single card in your tableau compared to your opponents. And so the goal of this game is to have variety as well as specialization in one or more types of these cards for points. You also have other effects in this game, including those personality cards, those leaders that were aforementioned, as well as territories, and which offer some one-time abilities or ongoing abilities as well, etc. You have a hand of cards that you can store some of these cards in, to prevent your opponents from taking, and you can play from your hand as well as from this market. But all of that revolves around the dice. So you have dice in all of the different colors of buildings, as well as technologies, as well as the black dice for the personality cards that you can use those for. There are rules to bend I guess, in a sense, to use dice to buy other cards that are not of the same color, but you do benefit if you, for example, are using this blue dice to acquire and produce this technology or research it, I guess. And so what happens that's interesting in this game is, for example, in a two-player game, if you have 3 options to choose from, and if you choose one of these dice, your opponents will choose another set of dice. The rest of these will be applied to the disaster track according to its color, and you just add up the sum of it as you go down these tracks, and once it reaches the end, in the disaster phase, you will have to flip over the appropriate cards on your tableau, like I have here, accumulated some damaged technology along the way. You can repair these by spending a dice to flip over up to 2, but that does prevent you from being able to acquire more cards and potentially increase your score along the game. There is this unrest track that you follow as well if you ever acquire dice that are in sum total more than 10. You add the remainder after 10 onto this unrest track. If it gets too high, you will lose value for the dice that you have to spend with, and if you reach the very end with a civil war, you have to flip over 1 card color of every type. And so this game essentially comes down to acquiring resources to purchase cards, which give you engines to build, and you try to outpace your opponents to having the most certain types of cards compared to them, as well as other combinations of cards to acquire ways to score points, as in an engine sort of way, and hopefully you have the most points by the time you end the game. So looking at a few game comparisons here, and obviously these are more of the civilization-themed games that I feel perhaps might have inspired this game, or at least have similarities. First of all, with Civolution. Civolution is a very new game that I've really enjoyed and played. I've reviewed Civolution already, but it utilizes a somewhat similar theme with a similar mechanism of dice drafting and placement, right? And so I think out of this game, as well as Nations, the dice game, which I have not played, in addition to how the market works in Nations, it's very similar in this game. I do wonder if the dice selection is somewhat similar in this game as well. So mechanically, I feel like there's a lot of similarity between these two games. I feel like there's similarity in track advancement, as is the case in Tapestry, which is also a civilization-themed game that includes a lot of tracks and tableau building utilizing cards. But then Ancient Knowledge kind of feels very similar to Nova Era in the fact that this is primarily a card-driven game that you're building a tableau with. In Ancient Knowledge, it's different, where you are placing them onto a moving tableau that slowly these cards will be lost to the tests of time, and you're trying to remove tokens on these cards before they leave your tableau. And in Nova Era, it's kind of similar, where certain effects will force you to flip over cards and not utilize their effects. And so it's sort of a dynamic type of tableau experience that I feel like is very similar between these. And the cards themselves in both games offer a lot of individuality, not in the same complexity as a game like Agricola, but in the sense that every card has a pretty straightforward action or mechanism that it provides, and it's pretty thematic as well. More on that later, but it kind of fits what the cards are trying to portray, whatever technology they're trying to portray from history. So yeah, complexity-wise, it does feel very similar to Ancient Knowledge as well. So I think this is the closest comparison. So looking at the comments on Board Game Geek from those who have tried and played this game, most likely in person, I've combined all of their comments and put it through AI to see what people were saying about this game. So it talks about this game, it's supposed to play, at between 45 and 90 minutes. And what people really enjoyed about this game are the mechanisms. You have dice drafting, card drafting, and engine building that felt pretty thematic as well. Each card has certain flavor around it, and the different tracks do matter and provide a lot of I guess, interaction from between you and the game as well as from player to player. A lot of these technologies offer a lot of player interaction, which causes you not only to compete for points, and also to compete for these cards from the market, but some of them offer some abilities that could negatively impact your opponents, in addition to fighting against the game itself, which is seen in the disaster track and dark age track that you're trying to fight as well. A lot of people really enjoyed the artwork, how easy this game is. Some people had some issues with the rulebook, the card balance in the Express variant. There is a faster way to play this game, playing only 2 eras. So you miss out on some of the combinations of certain cards in the full game. Some people didn't like that. Limited player aids, things like that, right? Some people had an issue with the take that element of some of these cards, but for others, they weren't as aggressive. So and some people did feel like this played a little too long for what it provides, or not thematically, but in terms of complexity. It probably overstayed its welcome for how quote-unquote light this game might feel to some people. But overall, my impressions are that people had very minor nitpicks to this game and generally enjoyed it. So going over my first impressions and final rankings for Nova Era, I have all of these these 10 criteria that I use to evaluate games based off of my tastes and what I look for in a game that I would want to play again. So starting off with, how good are the rules, the rule book, and the rules themselves? How well is it learned, and how streamlined is the gameplay? I would say it's pretty good. I'll give it a 9 because the rules are pretty straightforward. I like how quick this rule book is. It's very small, very similar to how streamlined Tapestry is to learn and teach. And it kind of gets out of the way and lets you understand the game based off of the cards and to explore all the intricacies of what those cards do without being in the way. So it creates a really cool system that I could see this being added upon with further complexity and perhaps expansions. Now, there were some edge cases that I feel like could have been elucidated a little bit more, perhaps with certain texts or icons on the game boards to help remind you how to score in each scoring phase, for example. That is nowhere in like a player aid, or at least that I remember, right? And so little things like that. There are small little rules about, like, if I didn't talk about, like, sometimes when you play a card in a future era, it will make another card from a past era obsolete, and you have to put that in the past. Whoever owns that puts it in the past. So very thematic, but it's not. But if you do it to your own self and you upgrade it, essentially your own technology, you get a point for that, and that's not apparent unless you have picked that out from the rulebook. Otherwise, aside from these edge cases, I found that it was really quick to learn and easy to remember for the most part. Strategic avenues, not too bad as well. I'll give it an 8 because I feel like there are different ways for you to win this game. You can follow the prescribed pathway to having more cards than anyone else, and especially in a 3 to 4 player game, it might be an interesting race, and you might have to only focus on one color and type of card to do so. So essentially, you are finding those other avenues in the different personality cards and leaders that you see, and the combination of technology cards as well, to help you gain those points in a different way that might be different from other players, and can create some new experiences every game as you continue to explore and get better at it. Mechanisms, pretty good as well. Nothing, super new here. I'll probably go at a 7. I do enjoy the dice drafting. It is probably the most abstracted portion of this game, as this is an abstracted civilization game without like a central board or anything. You do have a lot of tracks as well, and so that typically rubs me the wrong way, and it's too much of an abstracted representation of what you're trying to do in a civilization game. But I thought they served a good purpose, and I have to. The reason that I feel okay with it and give thematic integration a 10 is because a lot of these cards offer some amazing thematic integration. I was trying to zoom in on this card and have lost my spreadsheet here. But for example, a lot of these cards just really evoke what they're trying to portray. Like if it's a military card, like I don't know if I can zoom in without losing this, but aerial warfare, if your opponent has certain types of like castle walls or something like that, those are obsolete, and it gives you, certain damage if your opponents have certain cards or the lack thereof. And so a lot of these cards really interacted well with each other and represented what they do and represent what occurred in history and what kind of technology it does in a really cool way. So every card has flavor, albeit not the same complex flavor as, say, Agricola, but pretty darn close. I really enjoyed the spread that you have in this game. For variability, I'll give it a 9 because you don't get to see every single card in the game. You're probably seeing about half of each deck when you look at each era. And so you're not seeing every single card in the game. You probably would be able to play this game a handful of times to see the total amount of variety that you will see in this game. And of course, the order in which they appear will create that variability from game to game. But so it actually reminds me a lot of Glass Road, where the building pool is not as extensive as the pool of cards that you see in A Feast for Odin and Agricola, but it's variable enough that you still get a interesting mix every time you play the game, which creates just enough spice for it to feel different every time. And I feel like this game would have that for sure. Replayability. I would give this probably an 8 as well. I think this game can be replayable for the factors I've mentioned before, like variability. I'm a little wary because the 3 to 4 player game might feel a little longer than what it should feel like. I really enjoyed it at 2 players, or at least what I feel like a 2-player experience would be like. And so I think it's pretty replayable. Fun factor, I'll give it a 7 just to represent as well the opportunity that you have to negatively impact your opponent. I don't think it's very aggressive in this game, but it can hurt when you see yourself be damaged by the direct effect of someone else's card, but also based off of the choices of what other players make when choosing dice from the action selection and leaving those other dice open, left over to increase the disaster tracks as well. You could really start to hurt your tableau. Of course, that is pretty thematic, right? You're, as cultures and civilizations, battling the forces of nature, dark ages, as well as unrest and everything. And so kudos to creating a really cool quicker version of this game that integrates a lot of what history is about. And so I really do feel like that is done well, but perhaps to the behest of those who do not enjoy as much of that negative interaction between or among players. So this game is pretty interactive in how you score and how you draft cards before other people, drafting dice as well. Everything can and will affect your opponent. And so, this is a very, I might bump this up to a 10. I think this is a very interactive game for what it is. Despite you just building your own individual tableaus, I think that with the cards and the combinations thereof, there is plenty of interaction amongst players, right? And then finally, for skill ceiling, I think you can. I don't think it's going to be terribly competitive. You can really explore this game and get pretty good at it. I Once again, I compare it to Glass Road, a game which I have tried to master very recently, and I think you can reach a certain pinnacle pretty quickly with Glass Road. I don't think there's much more to learn in that game after playing it 100 plus times, and it's still fun to play at that point, but I think I've learned most of everything that I've needed to in that game, and I feel like it's going to be similar with Nova Era. It's not going to have the same depth and competitive complexity as a game like Agricola or Terra Mystica, of course. And so I think that just bumps it off a little bit. But I think there is opportunity to get better at this game and really understand the cards, the different card combinations, and what looks good, with the offering that you're having with this game in each round that you play. So I'm giving this game an 8.4 out of 10 on Board Game Geek. I really enjoyed this. I think I would love to explore this more. It hits the right amount of playtime that I'm looking for in a game. The civilization theme is something that I really appreciate. In general, I do gravitate a lot towards those types of games. It doesn't feel too abstracted because of the flavor of cards that you have and how they interact with each other. I do feel like there is a lot of opportunity for negative interaction, which might hold it back for some people, and I will hold out to see how this game would play at a 3 to 4 player count as well for length. But other than that, I think this game hits pretty well, and I think if you do enjoy a civilization-themed game, if you do enjoy games like Ancient Knowledge or Tapestry, which kind of fit that medium weight type of experience, then I think you should try Nova Era. So really excited to see. I understand that this game is still, could have some tweaks in development, and I'm really excited to see it flesh out completely and perhaps have some additional content in the future, and I hope it does well. So Nova Era, high praise from me and from many people who have played this as well. So thank you for checking out this review, and hope that you schedule an appointment with me, your board game doctor, real soon. Take care.